Hello and welcome to this fireside chat. I'm James Devonshire, news editor at The Manufacturer, part of 19 Group, and your host for this discussion on industrial agility. Now, I'm delighted to be joined today by Microsoft's Claire Brown, Weetabix's Suraj Subaro, and HSO's Matt Birtwistle, who will be sharing their insights on the topic. Claire, Suraj, and Matt, welcome. Before I set the scene, can I ask you to briefly introduce yourselves to our listeners? And we'll start with you, Suraj.
Hi, nice to be here. I'm Suraj, and I lead the Weetabix IT and business applications team. But I've been doing that for a year, but before that, for a couple of years, I've been running the digital transformation program, which for us was bringing in D365 into Weetabix.
Okay, brilliant. Claire?
Hi everyone, I'm Claire Brown. I lead the manufacturing, travel and transport sectors within Microsoft UK. So I lead a team of managers, account executives and account technologists that are responsible for the customer value and the transformation programs that we run throughout those sectors.
Okay, brilliant. And last but certainly not least, Matt?
Yes, hi everybody. I'm responsible for the manufacturing vertical here at HSO UK, so lead all of our go-to-market activities and support our customers in the manufacturing space.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. So what I'll do before we actually get into the main discussion is I'm just going to set the scene a little bit based on the findings of this year's Industrial Agility Assessment. So in October, we published our latest Industrial Agility Assessment, a report that I authored and the fifth iteration in our series in partnership with HSO. This year's report reveals how industrial agility has hit a 5-year low and paints a picture of a sector that has matured in its response to turbulence, but is struggling to maintain pace under constant strain. While many firms are continuing to adapt, confidence and flexibility have eroded amid geopolitical state instability, cost pressures, and talent shortages. So that's briefly where we are in terms of industrial agility. So without further ado, I'm going to crack on with the questions. And the first one is for you, Matt. So, Matt, the 2025 Agility Assessment shows agility at a 5-year low, with only 45% of manufacturers and distributors describing themselves as highly or extremely agile. What do you see as the main drivers behind this decline?
Good question, and I think some of the things that you sort of highlighted in your brief praise sheet just at the top there is indicative of kind of what's going on. If we go back to when we first started doing the survey, which was just as we came out of the pandemic, and I think people had to adapt very, very quickly, hugely, at huge speed. To cope with how to manage a workforce and adapt to the circumstances of COVID. And that gave people that feeling, yeah, we were very, very agile in order to just do that. But I think what you've seen since then has been a huge amount of headwind. In the last 5 years has really been a struggle for manufacturers. They are by nature a very optimistic bunch of people. But there's no question that the headwinds have been very, very significant. Supply chain challenges, the geopolitical situation with wars and so on having an impact on supply chains, the government environment, a whole raft of issues that has really just knocked people's confidence a lot. And I think that's why we're now sort of seeing that feeling of there's more that we could be doing, but we just don't quite know how to get there. And hence why I think we've seen the lowest assessment of agility this time around.
Yeah. Thank you, Matt. Claire, from your perspective, how does this decline in agility impact digital transformation priorities for manufacturers?
I think from the customers that we speak to and the customers that we work with, they've actually moved from those big bang transformation programs like the big connected factories, smart factories, and they've gone for more pragmatic digital transformation programs. So they're focusing really heavily on operational resilience first, prioritising automation, predictive maintenance. I know Matt mentioned about supply chain visibility. We're seeing a lot around supply chain visibility over those large scale reinventions that we've also seen. We're getting, because AI is now prominent, and I know we'll come on to discuss that later, but we're getting a lot of programs around connected data chains and making sure that we're unifying IT, OT and business decisions and business systems so that we can get the correct information at the right place in order to make sure that agentic AI operations is able to provide what it needs. I mean, a great example of that is a large aerospace manufacturer that we're working with, and they've improved machine usage. It's a smaller program, but it's improved machine usage by 30%, and it's avoided sort of 400 plus maintenance events annually. So it's those smaller, more pragmatic, predictive maintenance, supply chain visibility, supply chain resilience, predictive planning that we're seeing rather than the large scale transformations.
Yeah, and that's certainly the same what we hear with our discussions from manufacturers week in, week out. Absolutely. I want to stick with you, actually, Claire. We mentioned AI, and the report this year highlights that 64% of manufacturers are prioritizing AI adoption, but skills gaps and data readiness are major barriers to this transition. How is Microsoft helping manufacturers overcome these challenges?
I think from a data readiness, they're probably two separate areas, but converge together. From a data readiness perspective, that's absolutely key to any AI programs that we put in place, and that's what we suggest companies do first of all. So from a data readiness perspective, we work really, really closely with all our customers around that. We've got what we call an AI experience accelerator, which actually helps smaller SMEs organize pilots into scaled AI adoption, and a lot of that is around making sure that you've got the right data platform, that the data platforms, it's secure, it's resilient, and it's scalable. So we spend a lot of time with those SMEs, work quite closely with Made Smart and some of the regional hubs in helping with some of that data readiness and some of those programs. And we've actually, from a skills perspective, that's something that I personally am quite passionate, and Microsoft itself is quite passionate about. We're trying to make sure that we skill up as many people from underrepresented areas as possible. So we do a lot of work with frontline workers. We do a lot of work with underrepresented. We work with the likes of Catch 22, with Generation, with Prince's Trust in driving and helping those non-profits to deliver accessible training for diverse groups, whether that be SMEs or frontline workers. So we do a significant amount around AI skills and readiness. And obviously the government's just announced the new Tech First programme, and that's got a key focus with manufacturing. I think that's going to be a real game changer for a lot of the smaller manufacturers in making sure that they can take advantage of some of those government initiatives that have been put out there. And again, we're working that with Made Smarter and some of the regional hubs and the key charities in driving that forward. One of the key things I'm proud of, and I've got two of these apprentices within my team, is we've actually launched an AI-powered productivity apprenticeship, which is absolutely brilliant. I've got two of those apprentices, but that's the UK's first accredited programme, and it's focused on Microsoft Copilot and our AI tools to try and help drive that from the underrepresented areas and the younger generations, because quite a lot of the issues within manufacturing that we find is it's a lot of the younger generations, a lot of the key information that's held in manufacturers is held in people's heads, that when those people retire, that's when we're going to have the issue. So trying to bring those resources in is absolutely critical. And probably the final point that I wanted to make sure people were aware is there's something called Microsoft Learn. And within that, there's an AI for manufacturing leaders learning path. And that covers strategy, it covers data readiness, it covers practical use cases. And it's a great free resource that anybody can go into and just learn and upskill themselves on what manufacturing use cases are, how you can utilize AI properly within manufacturing.
How has Weetabix approached digital transformation to improve agility and resilience?
I think our approach, we've just come off a big go live on D365 in November 24, and our approach was very much to minimize our customizations and truly set ourselves up for the SaaS future of the world being on SaaS. So set it up well, which meant we paid a lot of attention to data, to cleanse the data we didn't need, and the data we had was fit for purpose, identify the right data owners within the business, share the understanding of what the functionality of the data is. So spend a lot of time and effort trying to get that piece right. And in trying to be SaaS ready, we also minimize customizations and set the roadmap for what future delivery of the application could look like. Again, I think to Claire's point, doing big programs is quite difficult. It's quite disruptive for manufacturers and businesses. So this idea of little and often is something we've embraced. And we've also allowed our users to embrace to the idea that you're not going to have these big bangs, but be ready for lots of little improvements in your solution. And you actually almost create an expectation of a roadmap rather than a one-off delivery model. And that's quite key for people to embrace the idea of what's going to come. I think the other focus on digital transformation was trying to be very mindful of the user's experience, especially the operators and the warehouse staff. We invested possibly a disproportionate amount of time making sure we had the right handhelds and the handhelds function exactly as we wanted, and we had good Wi-Fi coverage wherever the handhelds operate. Because if their experience is not good, it's almost sure that your process will not sustain itself. Process does not sustain itself. The data what comes out is not quite indicative of the system hygiene. So we invested quite a lot of time at the front end experience of the operators who are by and large the source where a lot of the data is collected from a manufacturing point of view, especially shift managers, operators, warehouse staff. So we deliberately and carefully looked at those aspects. And I think apart from that, we used our digital transformation to minimize single points of failure. I think it won't be unusual that in a lot of companies, there are unsung heroes who hold a lot of the process knowledge, and the process revolves around their presence at work and their experience set. So our digital transformation was very deliberate to try and have multiple people looking at it and also have the system do the job what people did by way of their experience and their ways of working. And that was our approach to try and walk away from single points of failure. So when you look at resilience, when you look at reliability, you're using the system more. The system is SaaS based, so your reliability and upskilling is much quicker. And you get into this idea of user experience at the front end, which ensures that our data is clean, our data is governed, and then allows us to think of AI in a more meaningful way without a huge catch up to do. So that's some of the key things we've done here.
Okay, thank you, Suraj. Following on from that, Matt, what practical steps can companies take to achieve quick wins when it comes to automation and planning?
Ooh, I think the first thing is probably trust your people to have the right ideas and the thoughts, and give them the opportunity to be able to actually action those things. You don't need to have a dedicated team or program in place to make these things happen. But what you want to be able to do is to take advantage of where people can see things and then there's a need for automation to be able to allow them to do that change quickly. I mean, here at HSO, obviously, we work with the Microsoft technologies and the ERP systems, just as Suraj was describing there with D365. These modern applications are not set in concrete. They are designed to be changed and to be adapted as you go forwards. You know, the idea of continuous improvement and taking some of the lean thinking principles that manufacturers have done for years is applying that same thought process and realizing that the systems will be able to do that and the tools are there to help support that. So I think that's really the key message that I could give to people is trust what your people can identify and know that the technology is there to support you and able to make those changes very, very quickly.
Okay, great. So moving on from digital transformation, we're going to move on now to supply chain skills and sustainability. And my first question is for you, Suraj, and that is, what are the biggest challenges you are facing in building agility within your supply chain, and how are you overcoming them?
Oh, it's a difficult one. I mean, supply chain it's under pressure. You said it at the top of the hour. There is lots of challenges of the cost pressures, which means what's contingent, what is right to do from a resilience point of view cuts against the lowest cost to serve model. And there are constant conversations on what are critical raw material, what are critical spares, what is the critical packing material we have, and how diversified the vendor base is, which is great for resilience. But what's the cost to serve impact of having a diversified vendor base and the management cost of that? So that's a constant battle. I don't think there's a easy right or wrong answers, but the geopolitical situation and the cost of living constantly impacts how much and of what you can do, and you keep trying to strive that balance for your critical ingredients, critical raw material. I think the other bit we've had to really carefully look at is look at the model from farm to fork, look at our journey from farm to fork as to what is the route the wheat takes through before it becomes the Weetabix product we all know and then ends up in the cup of the user, and identified a few big single points of failure. So a couple of robotic machines in our warehouse, huge assets which perform very well, hugely reliant on them, but how do you create a bit of resilience if one of them was to go out of commission? what is your route to operate when some of these key assets fall down. We look at digital transformation, and SaaS has made some of those concerns smaller, but there are physical assets in the warehouse which you need to work your way through. And that's almost a deliberate program to say, how do you create that roadmap, which over 3 to 4 years gives you a little bit of comfort from single points of failure on the asset, or that your asset maintenance schedule is in line with your requirement of the asset and your expectation of the upkeep time of the asset. So again, a lot of conversations around that. And the other bit, which is a bit of a challenge again, is to try and get users' expectations around simplicity of the application estate. There is a natural desire for productivity, and there are lots of unitary applications which can solve unitary problems in the supply chain, but they're not always the best connected, or they're not always the most resilient, because there's a lot of upkeep time required to keep those things working. So getting the idea of the users accepting there's a roadmap and there's a trade-off between resilience and unitary functionality, that's the conversations we constantly have. So it is a challenging world. We are also in a part of the world where the supply chain talent there's a fierce competition for supply chain talent, right from the warehouse space to the warehouse operators down to manufacturing. So it's a battle on all these fronts you constantly have to fight. I mean, a great brand name, just edit that. A brand name helps us get after a lot of these in a very meaningful manner, but it is a challenge you got to constantly fight. It's not getting easy. It's certainly not getting easy.
Yeah. Thanks, Suraj. Claire, over to you for a sustainability question. Sustainability has slipped to 4th place in our report this year. How can digital tools help companies keep their sustainability goals alive while focusing on cost and resilience?
I think this is a conversation that I have quite often with a lot of our board members and our customers. And actually, when I talk about sustainability is the same as efficiency. If you try and create some of those cost efficiency, if you look at operational resilience, as you look to drive those programs, that actually helps your sustainability measures. So yes, we've got some products that can help. So we've got Microsoft Sustainability Manager, which automates your scope 1 to 3 reporting. But to me, actually, some of those key programs that we spoke to before around predictive maintenance, that drastically improves your sustainability measures. You know, the company I spoke about before, their sustainability measures have improved because they're not flying engineers all over the world in order to try and help and maintain some of those jet engines. So actually, if you're looking at every efficiency program you look at it from a sustainability angle as well, because efficiency is at top. Efficiency is number one, operational resilience, supply chain visibility. All those programs actually help your sustainability metrics. So, you know, we've got great examples of AI-driven optimization helping reduce scrap. We've got specific examples. Energy usage and energy costs have been spiraling over the last 2 or 3 years. I know you mentioned that, James. And actually, with energy consumption, you can get some AI-driven optimization around energy consumption, which reduces your cost, but also helps with your sustainability metrics. And then you can also use agents to monitor things like OEE, TCO, and carbon in real time. So embedding that sustainability into your operations can actually really help without derailing any of those cost priorities that we've got.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Claire. Matt, over to you. Suraj mentioned skills in his bit a minute ago about supply chain. Skill shortages remain a major barrier for industrial companies. What strategies do you recommend for closing the skills gap or attempting to close the skills gap?
Yeah, I mean, it's a broad area as well. I mean, if we think about it in terms of the skills that are needed for an organization to become more agile and take advantage of technology, I can probably address that question somewhat more clearly, because there's no question that in the past, you know, technology has been viewed as it's an IT thing, therefore we need to have the right sort of IT skills within the business in order to execute on that. And that is challenging for a lot of manufacturing organizations, because they don't want to be investing in that. They want to be investing in the things where they're making the product, and that's what's making them the money. I think what's happening is that now we're seeing, with the introduction of AI technology and some of the things that Claire was highlighting, and the agentic approach that is happening in the world of work, where the use of agents is changing what the tasks are, what you're finding with the introduction of that technology is more of what a business person is able to execute themselves with an idea. In other words, what I'm saying is that you don't need to be an IT expert in order to affect those changes. And that means that the need for highly skilled people in that, what you would have thought, that's what I would need. You don't need that. You just need to have the smart people that you would want to be recruiting within your business, your engineers, your designers, your operators. They're highly skilled people. They've got the brain power in order to do this. What we're now able to do is to give them the tools that are much more intuitive. And so there's less of a reliance on the IT organization. There's a less of a reliance on organizations like HSO as suppliers of this technology. What we want to be doing is to be creating that powerhouse within the organization. So as a technology partner to any of our customers, we want to be at the forefront of training their people so that they can be responsible and in control of making those changes themselves. And if they want to introduce a new agent, they can do that. Not a problem at all. If they want to automate processes, again, they can do that because we've shown them how to use the technology. And I think that's really the answer in terms of addressing what is a key part of what we see as being that skills shortage. How do you get that brain power in order to execute the changes rapidly and to derive the benefits?
Thanks, Matt. I've got a quick question off the back of that, actually. So you talked about people using technology. Have you ever encountered any situations where people who aren't necessarily technology savvy have kind of pushed back and given any kind of resistance or anything when you've put this technology on to them?
Yes, I mean, that becomes very much part of a change journey whenever you're looking to introduce. And Siraj was making the point before, he was talking about some of the warehouse operations and the use of a handheld terminal. It was kind of new to be introduced, but they had to make sure that it worked, because if it didn't work, it wasn't going to be accepted. And I think it's having that awareness of being able to say to somebody who might be resistant about the technologies to say, well, actually, here's the benefits. This is what's in it for you. Yes, we understand that you're going to be reluctant at first. Change is always uncomfortable, but you'll get this benefit. Now, again, they might push back on that and say, well, actually, I don't believe I'm going to get that benefit. But as Siraj was saying, they were able to demonstrate that it did do things quicker. It was easy to use. And just having that awareness is how you start to overcome. It's a typical change journey, but very, very important in terms of getting that increased adoption of the technology.
Siraj, you were nodding your head throughout that. Is there anything you want to add on that point at
I
all?
mean, plenty of cases where often when you bring new technology, people want to use the new technology in the old ways of working. You cannot drive a car the way you drove a horse and carriage. It's going to behave differently. And what we often get wrong, I'm not a IT person by background. I was sales and commercial. So to Matt's point that technology and adoption of technology can be learned, I'm probably a classic case of somebody who's made that move from sales and commercial into technology. But clearly, wearing the shoes of the users and giving yourself the time to educate the user and overcome some of these. A lot of them are fears. A lot of them will be a risk of whether will I be able to be as optimal as I'm in my current setup? Will I become redundant? Will I be outdated? It's concerns like that. And often people try to customize the technology solution to embrace what they currently do manually without the technology. And that's clearly the wrong way to go about it, which means that for people who implement programs, please give the time for change management. You try and do it at the back end of a program when you've got to go live in 3 weeks' time. It's going to go wrong because there are deep-seated people concerns you've got to address and you've got to root out. So it's got to factor in quite early in your thinking as to what is the people experience, what's the people resistance, and how do you adapt your approach and your solution to make it work for them. So I think it's a key part of a lot of the programs which sometimes with the technology focus gets underplayed. And it will go back to that. There are people who are technology evangelists who will run with it and show you how it's done. Equally, there are people with lots of valuable skills, experienced people in a company like Weetabix. We've been around for almost 100 years. So a lot of our colleagues are 20 years plus experience. They have valuable knowledge about what keeps the company ticking. To make sure they are comfortable with what you're doing takes time, takes very deliberate effort, and you can't just hope to do it on the back of everything else technical and then give them a piece of training and they should be ready for go live. It tends to disappoint when you take those approaches.
Yeah, thanks for that, Suraj. Moving on now from skill shortages, we're going to talk about government strategies and incentives. A question for you, Claire. What role do government incentives play in accelerating digital adoption and AI deployment?
I think for me, they are a part of it, because we need to make sure that especially SMEs are able to access the same as some of those large global accounts. So they are a key part of the strategy. We work quite closely with Made Smarter and Catapult. So it's important that SMEs are in those centres and utilising what's available there to deliver the skilling and the adoption pathways. And the new Tech First programme that's just been launched by government, that's 187 million, I think it is, an investment. That's actually got a key part of that is around advanced manufacturing. So that's around AI driven maintenance, that's around robotics and supply chain optimization. That money is there for manufacturers to utilize. There's programs in place to upskill. So making sure you are aware of those, working with the likes of Made Smarter, working with HSO who are aware of all those programs, working with Microsoft, you can actually really drive the benefit and make sure you're getting the true benefit from that AI optimization. So it's making sure you're using the incentives, making sure you're using the learn pathways that have been specifically created for you, and working with your key partners to try and drive that forward. A key part for me, a key part of making sure that you're able to drive around AI deployment is that data readiness and making sure you've got a data platform that's resilient, secure, especially with a lot of the cyber incidents that are happening at the moment. And a lot of the government incentives, they have programs that help with that data readiness. They have programs that you can utilize to drive that forward. So it's making sure you're aware of what those are, working with the catapult centers if you want to look at innovation, and really taking advantage of what's out there.
Thanks, Claire. Perfect. Moving on from that, Matt, over to you. Similar theme. How are manufacturers responding to shifting government regulations and incentives?
Cautiously is the word. We also, as well as the other organisations that Claire was talking about, we work closely with Make UK and the memberships that we get the opportunity to be in front of. And the vast majority of them are really the SME community. And I think what we see is lots and lots of questions about how to actually make this come alive. And obviously there is funding that is available that people can access by the government. But I think, by and large, the key message was, up until quite recently, was we need to have an industry strategy because it was so lacking. Now that there is one in place, it's kind of, okay, well, what does this mean? And of course, at the same time that the industrial strategy was being created, the world of AI became so predominant. And everybody's going, well, what do I do with this? How do I make this work? It's like, do I apply it? And there is a little bit of fatigue that's now stepping into some of the conversations I had where people are saying, could you just talk to me without saying the letters AI? And we have to be mindful of that because it comes back to, the key question is, okay, how am I going to be able to change my business to the benefit? How am I going to get it to grow? What are the things that I need to be doing? And we have to start to answer those fundamental questions first of all. And then we think about what the technology is going to be appropriate, because it's not always saying it's an AI answer. It could be something completely different. So as I say, I see very much a changing landscape around a desire to do more things. And this is again being borne out with the results of the survey, where there's a willingness to invest in technology because people do think that is going to be very, very much helpful in growing. The question is what bits of technology to actually use.
Okay, thanks, Matt. So looking ahead, 2026 and beyond, question for you, Suraj, and that is, what lessons from Weetabix's transformation journey would you share with other manufacturers and distributors preparing for 2026?
I mean, I could say a lot. We had a very successful go live. We wound up hypercare at the end of 1 month. We were starting to wind up hypercare. So we had a very good go live for our ERP program. But if there's one thing I would say, try and make it business sponsored. Try and keep it as far as you can from a digital or a technology program. Our program was very strongly supported by the exec board, very strong support for the exec board. 50% of the program team were business process experts, not technology experts at all. They didn't know technology, but they in and out understood how each of the functional value chains worked. Uh, Spent a lot of time on change management, and getting users accepting of the system, understanding their pain points, and reflecting that in our response. If there's one thing you could do, you could just make it a business program rather than a digital or a technology platform. Uh, it allows you greater berth for a wider conversation, more empathetic conversation with your customers, understanding their pain points, solving their problems, and getting them operating on the system the way you'd want it to. And if you can do that, your chances of getting this right are massively, massively enhanced. So keep it business sponsored. If that's another one, I would say pay attention to data very, very early. We didn't get it right, and we spent a lot of countless man hours trying to rectify that later in the program. Uh, but data is not cleaning legacy data, understanding the use of data, finding owners of data. That's an organizational wide impact, and you need to give the time for everybody in the company to get up and understand. Especially traditional businesses like ours, where you have people who've spent decades in the organization, have knowledge, but don't have the same intimacy of technology and data. And you've got to spend the time because you need that insight to come and weave into it. So I would say spend the time on data. It's not a data migration team's job. It's a much bigger job than that, and make it a business sponsored program as much as you can. The greater you do that, the easier everything else becomes. You get a lot of bandwidth, you get a lot of forgiveness moment it's a business program rather than an IT program. If it's an IT program, you're judged very differently to how you're judged when it's a business program, and the support and sponsorship you get is very different. So I think it's a call out both for people, C-suite executives who spin off these programs in their companies, for them to recognize this, as much as the leaders of these programs to understand that. Make it wide based for you to have the best chance of success. And for us, I would say the 50-50 mix we had of seconded, dedicated process people in the program team was the reason, supported by the top management, we could keep it a business program all through.
Thanks, Suraj. That's great. Claire, what emerging technologies do you believe will have the biggest impact on industrial agility as we head into 2026?
So I know I spoke a lot about it, and I'm going to use the words, Matt, that you said people are getting fed up of, but AI, unfortunately, is the buzzword. And actually, I think it's moved on from AI to agentic AI. So it's, agentic AI for me is instead of looking at systems of record, we're moving to systems of action. So we're using agents to really execute workflows at scale, which makes a massive difference in productivity. We're also seeing things like we have a product called Microsoft Fabric, which really unifies the IT and the OT data. So it gives you those contextualized insights, and that's absolutely critical for agentic AI. But I think for me, the big difference in 2026 is we talk about what we call a frontier firm. So manufacturing at the moment, a lot of those are in stage one of that. There's 3 stages. Stage 1 is the human plus assistant, so it's all around personal productivity with things like our Microsoft Copilot, other products, etc. And then stage 2 is really human led with digital colleagues, so you have agents that join the teams as collaborators. And then stage 3 is really agent operated, and that's where we're starting to see a couple of the really forward thinking manufacturers progress, and that's all around the humans define the goals, and then the agents handle those workflows and those executions, so they execute at scale. And that's in things like safety agents, it's in predictive maintenance, it's in supply chain planning, supply chain visibility. All those small incremental programs, we're actually starting to see that drive from an agent perspective to take over some of those, which really does drive efficiency and cost savings.
Thanks, Claire. Following on from that, Matt, what advice would you give to leaders looking to future-proof their organizations?
I mean, I think we are at a tipping point. I think it's quite an exciting time that we're now in. Obviously, the world of AI is changing the world of work. I think that brings a lot of opportunities. But in terms of answering your question, I think the key advice that I could give to people is adopt a continuous improvement mindset. I think that is so critical. You might have systems that you might have been running for 10, 15 years. It doesn't really matter. You might have put something in just 2 years ago that is running your business. But my point is that with a continuous improvement mindset, you're looking for those opportunities to be making a difference to your business. And that is able to be delivered a lot more through the use of technologies that means I don't have to, and because I've come from the world of ERP, I'm very familiar with this, where people would historically every 10 years they'll be looked to replacing their ERP systems and say we need to go and get the latest and greatest. That world has now moved on. We don't need to do that. The investment in SaaS technology has changed the landscape with the cloud. However, there are a lot of manufacturers that are running older systems. Do they need to go and replace those systems? Well, no. If it's recording the transactions, you don't. Modern technology, and Claire talked about Microsoft Fabric for a data platform, the tools around Power Platform, and also the agentic approach with AI allows you to achieve so much more. So even with older technology, you can wrap around that with new technology that will allow you to automate your processes, introduce agents, get the efficiencies much, much faster than going, I need to replace my ERP system, and it's going to take me 2 years to do that program of work. So I think that's the best advice that I could give people is adopt that approach to continuous improvement, whatever your landscape is, but just embrace it and then look to figure out how that technology is going to support your strategic goals. And if you look at your strategy for the next 5 years and you say, if I'm going to increase, my customer penetration, or I'm going to grow my markets, well, how am I going to do that? What am I going to do with my sales force in order to make that happen? When you start to answer those questions, I say, with that continuous improvement mindset in place, the technology will just follow on behind that.
Thanks, Matt. My final question, I'm going to put this to all three of you, and we'll start with Suraj first. If you could give one piece of advice to industry leaders facing uncertainty and volatility in 2026, what would it be?
I think the events of this year, both cyber and geopolitical, tells you that disruption is closer to hand than any one of us anticipates. We think it's a black swan event which happens once every so many years. The reality of 2025, 2024 tells you it's probably closer to hand. Probably last 5 years since the oil shock prices, it's closer to hand than one expects, and it probably starts to pay for you to work through your operational resilience plan when you're not in the heat of battle, working through what are your must-haves, what is your resilience plan, what's your contingency plan. If an event was to happen, are you ready? What you're going to do? Do you have your comms established? Do you have your priorities established? Because trying to figure those out in the heat of the battle is next to impossible. I think in the heat of the battle, some of you just need to worry about communication. Some of you need to worry about fixing things which is broken, be it supply chain, be it cyber, be it what. So while it sounds dooms and it sounds negative, I do think it's closer to hand than most people expect, and it's starting to get to a stage of do those planning events when you have the time. Do the planning events when you're not in the heat of the battle, and your response time and your recovery time is going to be so much quicker. So if we try and do it once every couple of years to try and have these conversations within the business, and I think for us, the intensity of the conversation, the depth of the conversation needs to look different, because again, the events of the recent past have told you that you need to think at a level of detail which is not what you normally do in a standard desktop exercise. So do it differently. Do it, engage a few more people in, because when these events happen, a few more leaders and people need to get involved in getting the fix right, and try and plan that in your schedules, because time is always going to be scarce, but try and plan some time for events like this, some of these exercises within your businesses, I would say.
Yeah, thanks for that, Suraj. Claire, your one piece of advice to industry leaders facing uncertainty and volatility in 2026.
I think for me, it's probably having a more open mind. So the companies that are really succeeding at the moment, AI is here, whether we like it or not. And I know a lot of companies are burying their heads in the sand and assuming that they will be able to get there. But AI is really a business tool. It's not a CIO and a CTO tool. AI really needs to be embraced at the business. So go and learn about it. Don't be scared about it. Go and learn about it. Reach out to the partners that are aware of it and understand how it can really transform your business. And as I said, you can do that in small incremental elements. It doesn't have to be a massive transformation, but go and understand what agentic AI is. Go and understand how other customers are using it, whether it be in manufacturing or other industries, and see how you can embrace that, because if you don't, then there will be other people that will.
Thanks, Claire. Finally, Matt.
I think, great points made by both Suraj and Claire there, which I can only just echo. And I think for me, the final piece of advice would be, lean on your technology partner. They will have the answers in how to apply this technology to the benefit of your business. And if they're not able to support your strategy, you're not getting that sort of advice from them, then maybe you haven't got the right partner. But in most cases, you will do. And I think that's a critical part of the journey, is thinking about how do I turn what is a lot of, there is a lot of noise around everything that's going on with the topic of AI, lots of new terminology coming in. But if you're having those conversations with your technology partner about how this will actually work in your business, because they should know your business, you will go a long way.
So we've talked quite a bit already today about AI, and a subject that often pops up is the human side of AI, and the fact that AI is not transforming just processes, but also the way people work and interact. So how can business leaders ensure that AI adoption enhances the human experience at work, supporting trust, creativity, and well-being, rather than creating fear or resistance?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and you can tell by my grey hair that I've been around for a long while. I started work back in the late 1980s, and computers were certainly there. I started off as an auditor, and manufacturing businesses that I would go into did use computer technology, but in some of them they were still using punch cards to actually load the data into the systems. The accountants would get their journals, they would manually write them out and give them to the data processors, and they would get their trial balance in the morning when they came back into work again. It was very, very different. And the introduction of the PC then started happening. And again, the fear was there, computers are going to replace people's jobs. Well, we know that over the last 30 odd years, that hasn't been the case. Work has just changed. And I think what we'll see through the introduction of AI is a very similar journey. The internet, there's another example. When the internet started, I can remember someone just showing me the first webpage. I thought, what's that all about? What are you going to do with that? And it was just pictures that appeared. It's like, well, that's no use to anybody. Can't imagine not having the internet these days. I mean, it just becomes embedded into everything that we do. And again, it's changed the way that we work, changed the way that we research and look for answers and all the rest of it. And AI is no different than that. So I think whilst the fear is natural, the reality is that you still need people to do stuff. How they go about doing that stuff is what is going to change through the introduction of the new technology. So for me, and again, I speak not as an oracle on these things, but just somebody who has been through a lot of change over the last 30 odd years. I'm still here, I'm still working, I'm still doing a job that's very similar to what I did 30 years ago.
Okay. Thanks, Matt. I think that brings us nicely to a close. Unless Suraj and Clay, you've got anything else to add on that last point around
I mean,
AI?
from my perspective, I think there's so much we need to do. We don't have the time to get after. You cannot bury your head in the sand and worry about AI taking your job. I think our job as leaders is to make people train the people so they can embrace the technology, because God knows there's so much to do before we talk about losing headcount because of AI. And training people on AI, using AI well, allows us to get out of those things which we don't currently have the time for. So I don't think my view of it is that we almost cannot imagine what the future world will look like. And you don't want to be one who's not playing with these tools right at the inception, because it's going to leave you behind. So I think as leaders, our job is to gauge the readiness of our user base, gauge the readiness of the technology, and then find meaningful ways to bring it in while you train the people. It is not an option to sit on the sidelines. And if you want to be in business in 100 years from time, or even 50 years from time, you better be up with these technologies and learn how to adapt and adopt them for your circumstances.
Yeah. Okay. Final word, Claire, on AI?
Yeah. I think from my perspective, it is a change, and as humans, everybody is scared of that change and that uncertainty. From a Microsoft perspective, we talk about AI as being a co-pilot, not an autopilot. So it still needs a human person that's part of it. And actually, AI is taking away some of those repetitive tasks that you find mundane and you get really, really frustrated with. We did a workforce index report. We do one of those on a yearly basis. And actually, the last one showed that over 70% of employees want to use AI to help with those mundane tasks. So it's really about making sure that as you create those programs, that you're embracing some of those mundane tasks and you're showing the benefits of AI, and you're reskilling and upskilling your workforce in that time. So for me, it's a something that is going to happen no matter what. And as you said, Siraj, it's up to us as leaders to really show the people that we work with the benefit that it can bring and how it can actually transform and improve your productivity. I mean, we did some work with a manufacturer where actually the employee satisfaction grew from 23% to 56% because we'd introduced AI, and they were able to focus on the things that gave them joy rather than having to focus on those mundane tasks. So it's understanding what those are, working, as Matt said, with your technology partners to really help drive the right program of change, because this is just a program of change. So we need to make sure that we're bringing people with us on that program.
Brilliant. Thanks, Claire. Okay, that brings us nicely to a close. And I want to thank Siraj, Claire, and Matt for giving up their time today. It's been extremely insightful. And to anybody listening, if they want to find out more, I would highly encourage you to download the full 2025 Industrial Agility Assessment, because there is a lot more insights and data points in there, which should help benefit your learning around agility. So thank you, Siraj, Matt, and Claire.
Good stuff.
Thank you.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.